ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be. Now the trees sang a song to me. He said the birds sang it to the breeze. Just in case I was feeling.
Greetings and welcome to A Sip of Inspiration. I am Stephanie Wilson Coleman, your host for this evening's show. Today we're going to talk about a topic that is very dear to my heart, domestic violence. And joining me in that conversation is Tiffany Hightower and Colleen Sutkus from Sarah's Inn. I'd like to take a few minutes and allow my guests to introduce themselves to you. I want to remind you at home that this is a call-in show, so feel free to call in with your questions, and the number will flash at the bottom of the screen. But those of you who are ready, it is 312-738-1845. Hi, thank you guys for joining me. Let's start with you, Tiffany, and you can do a little housekeeping and let our guests at home know who you are, what do you do, why do you do it, and all that great stuff.
Well, once again, my name is Tiffany Hightower. I'm the Advocacy Programs Manager for Sarah's Inn, which is a domestic violence agency. I'm a certified domestic violence professional. I have been in the service field for a little bit over 10 years. I don't want to age myself, but I do it because I have a passion to help. I've always had a passion to help. It makes me feel good inside to help somebody else who's in need.
Now, what's an advocacy
programs manager?
Okay.
Okay, that means I oversee the women's program, the children and teens program, and Colleen and I together ensure quality services on the 24-hour crisis line.
Okay, and Colleen, tell us about yourself.
Hi. Again, I'm Colleen Sutkus, and I am the Community Outreach and Education Manager for Sarah's Inn. And I have worked in the domestic violence field for almost 18 years. Starting out in Iowa. I started out my service in domestic violence as a volunteer, as a crisis line volunteer. I currently work all of the prevention and education programs at Sarah's Inn. So I go out into the community giving educational presentations. I also oversee the volunteer program, and our volunteers work on our crisis line as well as other programs.
Now, I have discovered some staggering statistics about domestic violence, and that it could possibly be one of the #1 killers of women in America.
That's right.
And that the statistics, according to the courts, are staggering too. 95% of all of the cases in the courts are where the male is the batterer and the woman is the receiver of the abuse. Now, what I wanted to do is to clear up a little bit, because we talked about this on Sunday night's radio show. How do you define domestic violence?
Okay. Well, domestic violence is how Sarah's Inn defines it as intimate partner violence. So that can be physical, verbal / emotional, those things.
And it's a pattern of behavior, a pattern of behavior that allows the perpetrator of that behavior to gain power and control over their partner.
So how does it differ from anger management?
Well, the difference with domestic violence is anger management, you see explosive behavior all throughout that individual's world. With power and control relationships, that abuser chooses and makes a choice to be violent in that specific relationship with his partner.
And we're not saying that someone who has anger management issues might not also be abusive to their partner, but the issues are treated in completely different ways.
So if it is quite possible, then what you're saying is that the perpetrator or a person could be just explosive everywhere, at work, in the grocery store, but not be that way at home necessarily. However, and that's not necessarily domestic violence, but that doesn't mean that Mr. Fun-loving, go to Sunday school, play with the kids, fix everybody's plumbing problems in the neighborhood, isn't at home being abusive to that spouse. Because they save that activity or that behavior for that intimate partner.
That's right. And most often, that's the kind of abuser that you're going to see, is someone who, to the rest of his world, it shocks them if and when they find out that this person has been abusive to their partner.
Okay.
absolutely charming.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely charming. Okay. Now, what are the statistics again? As I have a curious question, I'm sure the audience at home is wondering too, is that we talked about women, but what about men, and what about people in same-sex relationships?
Well, research shows that same-sex relationships are impacted, could be possibly impacted as much as heterosexual relationships. There really is no
Okay.
strong difference there. And then the stat is about 3 to 5% of individuals are battered, of men are battered as well. 3 to 5%. It's low though.
So men don't talk about it, or it just doesn't happen the other way? It just doesn't happen that way.
Men usually, because, well, along with women, there's shame linked to it, but men
Okay.
usually will not come forth to say that they are being battered by their spouse or significant other.
And that's kind of part of the general victim blaming, general
Okay.
society victim blaming. If we hold women so accountable for the abuse that they suffer, then it's likely a man might think that society is going to hold him even more accountable because he is supposed to be tougher or stronger
Okay.
or the in charge person in that relationship. So if you're a man who's being battered, you're going to be far more cautious about coming forward or letting that secret out.
Gender roles play a lot.
Why do people stay in the relationship?
Let's see, there's a lot of reasons.
What are some of those reasons?
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, a lot of parents, they stay for the children. They stay out of fear. There are financial implications. So if this individual chooses to leave their significant other, they might then cut their income by half or might cut their income zero. They might be used to the quality of life that they're living, and then having to go into a shelter with their children. That is a huge barrier when they're living at home. Everybody's comfortable. Everybody's eating. That tends to be a barrier. And then also death. When a woman chooses to leave, that is the most dangerous time for her. And so,
Wow. So she's safer in the relationship than she is outside of the relationship in a lot of cases.
Sometimes. And it's our job as advocates to help her to figure out what is her best safety plan.
Okay.
That sometimes leaving the relationship isn't. Sometimes it is, but it's our job to help her to identify what barriers she has to leaving and what are the risks to staying and to make a plan around that.
I like that safety plan. So
Right.
you don't say just get out right now.
No.
We plan.
Right.
What would be an example of a safety plan?
well, that's a very good question.
Okay.
The advocates, we give women options.
Okay.
And so one of the options is you can either leave or you can choose to stay. And if you decide to stay, we want to make sure that you're safe. So we run through a list of questions. One thing on the top of the list is if you feel that you're in a dangerous situation and you can get to a phone, call 911. That should be part of every individual safety plan. 2, we talk about not having arguments in specific rooms. You should not have an argument in the kitchen. One of the reasons why you shouldn't have an argument in the kitchen is because there's knives and weapons and those things. We also talk about maybe having a duplicate set of keys for if you need to leave in a hurry. You can grab your keys, you can go to the car. In the car you might have some money, important documents, so that if you need to flee quickly you can. You might talk to a friend, a neighbor, a parent, so that you could call them if you needed anything right away.